in, folks, to another great episode of I've Got a Theory. I'm your host, Henish Follicle, and I'm here with Seven Jacobs, my guest today, who's a young entrepreneur that's helping support other young entrepreneurs to level the playing field. And he's also got a focus on mental health, and he's got some interesting theory to share with us. So let's talk about that. Seven, welcome onto the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Henish. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. Yeah. So tell me, you've had a worldwide travel experience already in your young life, going from the U.S. to the U.K. and
Yeah.
being a young entrepreneur, which is great. And I think a lot of people want to do that, but then they don't realize how much work it takes. I'll premise that with
Mm,
I'm 40 years old, and I became an entrepreneur around the age of 30 after working for other people for a long time. And I remember
mm.
my real estate attorney, mentioned that he's like, people become entrepreneurs because they don't want accountability.
Oh,
They
interesting.
don't want someone telling them what to do, how to do it,
Yeah.
how much time they need to spend doing it, and then they wonder why they didn't become successful, right? Because if you
Mm,
can't even hold yourself accountable, then who else is going to do it for you as an entrepreneur? Anyways,
yeah.
with that premise, let's get into it, because you mentioned it, in the pre-show, that a lot of entrepreneurs fail, whether you're young, old, or otherwise. It doesn't
Mm,
matter. But
yeah.
something's happening where 75% plus of businesses don't work out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? It's worldwide, I think it's closer to like 90%. It's crazy. And funny enough, it the older you get, the more likely you are to succeed, which is a nice point for a lot of entrepreneurs who have been working for a while and then decide I want to go into it. But you're right. I'm very much trying to help kind of level the playing field for younger entrepreneurs, where that failure rate is huge, and often it's because either we have an idea and we don't know how to be leaders, and we just kind of throw ourselves at it and we fail along the way and don't know where to go. Um, and so I kind of want to, even what we talk about today, it's really important for me that we kind of learn how to bounce back, be a little more resilient, be a little more accountable, and do what we love instead of just kind of creating a job for ourselves because we don't want a job under someone else, right? I feel what you
Okay, well, let's
mean.
get into it. So talk to me about your
Cool.
theory. Yeah.
Cool. So, um, this kind of started, and you mentioned my kind of journey moving over from the US to the UK. Unfortunately, the move actually was when I was quite young, and it wasn't a very happy move. It was a move that came about because of lots of issues growing up for me and within my family in the US. But we had some family over here in the UK, and so that's why we moved over. Now, to skip over the parts of that story that wasn't so relevant, or that aren't so relevant to today, we the things we experienced, that I ended up experiencing, um left me with a lot of difficult mental health issues. And so as a result, when I was kind of here in the UK in school, in a teenager, or as a teenager in high school, I had a lot of periods of really intense depression and anxiety and a few other things. And so the story today kind of starts during one of these periods of depression when I was essentially in school, not knowing what to do with myself and basically hating myself, which is something which was a very common pattern for me, feeling like something needed to change and not knowing what to do, and sort of being in this state of intense pain and not knowing what to do about it or what I wanted to even do with myself. And so the speaker came into our school that evening, and unfortunately, I don't remember kind of the premise behind the research or what it was called or who conducted it, but probably because I wasn't listening very much at the time. But one thing that he said stuck out to me, burned itself into my brain, and has stuck with me ever since, which is essentially this idea that all human beings are born asleep, which essentially means we're really unconscious and driven by totally by our subconscious or unconscious, and the our goal in life is to become more awake. So as we get older, we kind of want to become more conscious, more present. And the older I got, the more I realized it had a lot of overlap with kind of philosophy and philosophical kind of beliefs. And that reason that stuck out to me is because I felt like I was being so unconscious. I was being just totally absorbed in that really shitty state that I was in at the time. Um, so how does this lead into kind of the theory that I want to share with you today? I started to notice that when someone kind of genuinely cared about the things they were going through, the issues that they were experiencing, they would start to learn more from their mistakes. And it makes sense, right? If you don't care that you hurt someone or failed at a project or whatever, you're never going to learn how to do it better the next time or to change and improve.
Right.
So when people were when I was noticing, like, wait a second, when people care, they become more conscious and then they're able to act on it and improve for next time. To me, that was what felt like a little bit closer to that type of awakeness. And even again, I mentioned philosophers will talk about this idea of awakeness. How present can I be? How aware and conscious can I be of what I'm doing, why I'm doing it? Just helps us be a little bit happier and grow a little bit more. And so as I kind of got older, started taking some of these ideas with me, and then got into entrepreneurship as a young adult for the last few years. I was very much in this kind of place where I realized that, and if you kind of hear in the business world, we throw around like failures are important, learn from failures, et cetera,
Sure.
and just how important that is. I started to realize that all these failures were also helping us be more awake, helping us be more conscious, because next time, especially as a young entrepreneur, that became my best learning experience, as opposed to something someone else taught me or coached me through or mentored me about. That became the strongest piece of learning I could take, was reflecting on any failure that I experienced, anything that I went through.
Yeah, for sure.
um
I mean, I've heard it, the more profound the pain, the more
mm,
intense the learning from it, right? So it's kind of
mm,
directly relational. Like if it was a minor pinprick, right? I got a splinter because I ran my fingers around a fence, um, and it wasn't that bad. I'm like, I just got the outside. Not a big deal. I'm probably gonna do
yeah,
it again. But until it digs deep, and then I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't rub my hands
maybe I
along wood
should wear
fences.
gloves next time,
Yeah, or
yeah,
something
something
like that.
like that.
Right. It's only relevant because I'm building a fence right now. So
Yeah, yeah.
mentioned that thing, but it's true. I mean, yesterday we're at my neighbor's house and they have a 2 foot little wall, and their 2 year
Mm,
old fell off of it head first trying to reach for a
mm,
toy and scraped up his face a little bit. I was like, it wasn't bad. He didn't break any bones, broke a little skin, but hopefully he learns not to do that on that wall again. Right.
mm.
Hopefully he learns
Right,
that. That's the kids
exactly.
you do. You learn
Mm,
stove is hot. When you fall off of things, it hurts. Don't fall off of
mm,
things, right? And you learn
yeah.
those incrementally. And I see that with children, but you see that with
Mm,
adults too, right? Prime
yeah.
example is people will always be like, oh, I'm going to get into, business and I got a business partner. I'm like, step one, put everything in writing. And they're like, no, it's all good. We trust each other. I'm like, this is for when you know, shit hits the fan, you need this
Yeah.
paperwork to back it up. And sure enough, and I've
Mm,
been guilty of it too. 10 years ago, I didn't have enough things in writing. And sure enough,
mm,
it came to bite me in the butt. So now anytime I tell
yeah.
someone that they get into it, just write it down. Even if it's just on a piece of paper, I agree to this. I agree to XYZ, and this is what we're going to do. And if it goes sour, here's how we're going to resolve it, right? It's got to say something
Right.
just so we have a
And
framework. So
yeah.
you have a dissolution. So, the pain does teach you how to
Mm,
mitigate that pain in the future so you can
right.
have a
Yeah.
smoother experience.
And what's funny is even that example you've just given of writing things down, I see that in people of all ages all the time. Not just other young entrepreneurs I work with, but entrepreneurs who are 3 times my age. I'm seeing that.
Sure, let's do a
Um,
handshake deal. No, let's not. I mean, we can seal it
mm,
with the handshake, but let's write something down.
let's write something down. And and that's the thing, is it's these simple little things that can sometimes lead to the worst pain. And this is the thing, when we look back at it, we go, that seems really obvious. You should have written that down, because it's obvious that if you don't write it down, something might fall through or whatever. But it's these times when we're not aware, we're not we don't care enough about it. We don't care enough about the potential consequences. We're not open to these ideas. And that's why experience tends to be the best teacher. And it can be it's one of these things, these very human things, which is very beautiful but also very sad, in the sense that we spend years and years and years, our whole lives, learning and building up who we are, the things we've learned, and when eventually, when we pass away, all that's gone in an instant, unless we've left some kind of legacy behind. Whereas then the people we've left behind, our children and all the other young people, they've got to learn all of that from scratch. So to me, it became very kind of important to start to understand why do we do this? Why is it okay that we keep putting ourselves in these awful situations and needing to learn from our pain? But at the same time, why is it something we can also learn from, so that we don't have to keep putting ourselves through pain? So essentially what I guess I'm getting down to um is this idea that we kind of unconsciously put ourselves through painful experiences so that we can learn, right? So the examples you've given, it doesn't make it sound like someone is trying to set themselves up for failure so
Right.
that they can learn from it. um, but the theory is almost that there is some unconscious part of your brain that takes the lazy route of not writing things down, as an example, to use your example, or anything else that sounds like a conscious decision, but actually maybe the laziness is trying to teach us something. It's almost like the world is trying to make you shoot yourself in the foot if you don't make the right decision. And I think the examples to kind of illustrate this, the examples I think that make this the clearest are kind of, for example, someone who keeps getting into the exact same really toxic relationships, right? We've
Sure.
all heard of that person who um, is always hooking up with the exact same type of person who isn't actually good for them. And
Sure.
every single time, it's going to get a little bit worse. I've wasted even more of my time with this kind of person who isn't right for me. I've hurt myself again in this exact same way. It's
And there's
almost as
I had a doctor of psychology on a few weeks ago that went into the theory of why that's the case.
oh,
And the long story
ooh,
short is that the first crush that you have around 10 to 12 years old becomes kind of a prototype for future
yeah.
relationships. So if that first relationship was bad, well, that's how you
Ooh.
equate your future relationships until you can snap out of that vicious cycle.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So for me, that ability to snap out that vicious cycle, like where is the breaking point? What happened? Where's the meat in between the until you can snap out of that cycle? For me, it kind of felt like, because every time you do it, it tends to get worse, because again, you've wasted even more of your time, or you've hurt yourself even more continuing to do it. There's a part of our brain that's like, right, if you're not strong enough to break out of this now, I'm going to keep pushing you. You're going to do it again. It's going to hurt even more until you hit that breaking point. It's almost like eventually we're forcing ourselves to learn, because um, eventually something's got to break. Eventually something's got to give, and we've got to go, no, this isn't okay. And the reason I feel like it kind of makes sense is because myself and a lot of the people in my network that I've spoken to about this so far, we all seem to have these moments where something sparks and we go, this isn't good enough anymore. So for myself, when I was a young person, because of some of the stuff that I experienced as a child, I had very intense social anxiety. And that defined my life for a lot of my younger teenage years, until something in my brain snapped and I said, I'm not okay with this. And then I kept pushing myself to do things that, because my anxiety was so intense, almost sometimes felt like I was going to die. Like, it sounds silly, but that's kind of how it works. My
But
brain was
sure, I'm
like,
sure I,
no,
I get it.
don't do this,
It's probably
but
like
I had to learn.
it's probably like
Yeah.
stage fright,
Mm,
magnified out, right? If it's really
yeah.
affecting you, it's like being in front of a bunch of people and talking about something. Um, but then, how much of that did you learn came from where you placed your focus and how much you cared
Mm.
about how much other people potentially thought or didn't think about you?
Ooh, interesting. I think with that specific example, a lot of it came from the world around me feels like it's putting pressure on me and I'm not living up to it, right? I was always very much someone who kind of wanted to make the world a better place, felt horrible whenever I saw someone else feeling bad, or I saw issues like poverty, because I came from a very kind of deep rooted poverty kind of place as a child, and all kinds of other things. And so the more kind of it was either attached to the things I already cared about, or it was attached to the impact I could have on other people, or what other people, even what other people thought of me from a more selfish and subconscious place. I was like, okay, this isn't okay. This isn't good. Now that's very human. It's like, we need to be part of this tribe. So
For sure,
if
because I mean that's
everyone,
a base requirement for people is acceptance and approval.
exactly, yeah. So, I needed to kind of snap myself out of this, and pushing myself into situations that were painful was, it almost felt like my brain's way of snapping me out of it. Otherwise, I never would have changed. I never would have gotten any better. And I think I've had a lot of people where I'll initially say this kind of thing to them. We consciously put ourselves through pain in order to learn. I have a lot of people kind of say to me, people who aren't in these kinds of spaces that we're talking about, kind of saying like, no, people, they're really cynical about it, like, no, people are just stupid, people just unconsciously do dumb things and whatever. And I guess I like to believe that we we want to get there. There's a part of our brain that wants to get better, and there's a part of us that is able to do it. And this is, in a way, our mechanism, like our body and brain's mechanism of pushing us to improve, is allowing us to experience pain in certain ways. And if we don't learn, your body goes, let me give you some more so that you'll learn next time. Because it seems that that lived experience tends to, like we said, be the fastest and most impactful kind of motivator, right?
So, I mean, the prime example is the gym. You go to the gym, there's
Mm,
100 people in there pushing their muscles, their cardio,
mm,
their heart, their flexibility, whatever they're working on, beyond what's comfortable into the
mm,
range of potentially on the verge of pain, in the idea that your body repairs itself at an improved
mm,
state, right? And that's
mm,
just physically. But that same concept probably applies mentally as well, right? We've heard
mm.
no pain, no gain. It's kind of applicable.
Yeah,
But the way I've heard it, and if you ever take yoga or mindfulness or meditation, classes, courses, or spend some time doing
yeah.
that, one of the things that one of the things I've heard someone say is, don't consider it as pain, consider it as uncomfortable. And don't consider it as uncomfortable,
Mm.
consider it as not comfortable yet.
Ah, I love that. It's that little shift in mindset, isn't it? That just takes you from thinking something is negative or even impossible, and transmuting it into necessary, possible, positive, and an experience.
Yeah,
And
I like
I
I like
very
this,
much feel
the
that.
way to think about it is not comfortable yet, because yeah, anything can be hard, anything can be stressful.
Yeah.
And then you people that you see do it, right? The Olympics are prime example. When you see these
Mm,
dudes running over hurdles at 25 miles per hour, however fast they're going, and doing 100 yards in 10, 11, 12 seconds or whatever it is, man, they make it look easy. I could get out there and
yeah.
run. But the truth is, no
Yeah.
chance, no chance.
There's no way.
Before they even get the first lap, because they've practiced, put it in, they've pushed themselves beyond uncomfortable, where now it's comfortable for them to run on the world stage with the fastest people on the world, and accomplish it, right? Same with
Yeah.
business, right? There's a lot of
Mm,
competition out there in any business, right? There's no business in the world where you're like, I'm the only person that's doing this, and everything's going to go great, because as soon as someone
yeah.
sees that there's low hanging fruit, they're going to come and make it difficult for you. For every Coke, there's a Pepsi, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
someone's going to say, hey, no, you don't just get all of the market share. I want some of that. And we're going to do it a little bit
Mm,
differently and push it. And it's going to be a slightly different formula. We're probably going to fail a couple of times with Coke, Pepsi Clear, and these other varieties that we're going to try that are going to fizzle out literally. And
yeah.
and
I
they
love
work.
that
And
finally.
companies go through that pain by trying something, right? They experiment.
Yeah.
They experiment,
Yeah.
even if they are a reputable $100 million company. And the
Mm,
next thing you know, they try something and it didn't work. And like, crap, we wasted $50 million
yeah.
doing something. At least they found out.
Mm.
Here's what works.
Yeah,
Here's what doesn't.
exactly. Ultimately, that pain isn't something to be afraid of. I think the reason why, we attach the reason why this kind of thing is scary is because we end up inevitably attaching so much fear to the idea of pain. And in the same way that you can shift your mindset from like to thinking to thinking of it as not comfortable yet, in that there's a sense of possibility, you can shift fear out of the idea of pain, as long as you are conscious enough to learn from that pain and try better, try again next time, learn from that, and reflect on it. Essentially, that's what this theory is kind of all about, is as difficult as things are, if we've made them difficult for ourselves, it's because we want to learn, and therefore we have the opportunity to take a step back and make a radical change, even if we need to, as a result of that learning.
This I've done about almost 100 episodes now, if not 100 on this show. I've had some great people come on, super insightful. And one of my guests was a world champion kayaker,
Wow.
and his theory was was the difference between fear and danger. And he
Ooh.
was, obviously he's coming from a kayaking experience
Yeah.
where he's jumping down 100-foot waterfalls and stuff like that,
Yeah.
dodging boulders that are coming at you at 35 miles an hour. Um, so yeah, it's interesting how people look at it differently. And if your life and your livelihood revolves around risk, whether you're a kayaker or an entrepreneur that has
Mm.
to put their money and time on the line to make
Mm.
something be accomplished, it's risky, right? Ideally, you get the rewards. I work with real estate and construction. I put a lot of money into some of my projects, and if they don't hit, that's a real learning experience, right? I'm trying
Yeah.
to reduce the frequencies of those,
Of
but it
course. Yeah.
but it could still happen, right? And so it
Yeah.
just comes down to doing better due diligence and doing all the proper prep
Mm.
beforehand that you don't think of when you're doing your first deal, right? Um, so it's the case with any entrepreneur when you're trying to figure this. I mean, ideally, you read the book, get a mentor, have a blueprint on what you should be doing, and then figuring out what your secret sauce is that makes it a little bit different, a little bit more compelling than your competitor.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and that's the thing. You can really easily learn from what didn't work and from what worked for other people as long as you want to, right? Like you said, if you want to, if you care about other people along the way, whether it's other people's impact or I should say either your impact on other people or other people's perception of you, 100%, you can learn so much so quickly. I really feel that.
So, Seven, what's our takeaway from this? How do we take
Mm,
the information that you're imparting to impact our regular lives, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it is? What are some things that we can
yeah.
do differently to make?
I if I had to boil it down to one word, it would be awareness. Being aware of the situations you put yourself in and potentially even why you put yourself in that situation, learning a little bit from why that's the case, why you might be doing it, why is there maybe a negative habit? Again, is it that you're always getting into the same type of relationship that isn't right for you or anything similar? And taking that step back to learn about why, that gives you the space, the ownership, the state of mind, the space of mind to kind of go, what should I do about it? Because all this as well is all nice in theory, but then how does it impact what you actually do in your day-to-day life? In your day-to-day life, you can change little habits, you can make yourself more aware, you can start writing things down. None of it happens until you make yourself just a little bit more aware of what you're doing and why, and then you have the space to act on it.
Yeah, it's important to kind of plan things out. And
Mm,
when I plan things out and I try to visualize what the potential outcomes are, yeah, it's great to just think of only the positive outcomes, but I think it's
mm,
important as a mitigation tool to think of all the negative outcomes, right?
definitely.
What if the market changes? What if the interest rate changes? What if demand changes? What if I have
Mm,
a shortage of materials or XYZ, or we find a problem behind a wall in a house, right? So you have to kind
mm,
of go through those mitigations, um, because you can't just paint yourself a rosy picture and say, hey, this is all the three different ways this is going to work out great, because there's 10
yeah.
different ways it can go wrong. And you got to make sure
Mm,
that you know how you're going to mitigate against that as you're kind of
mm,
brainstorming through a thought experiment of whatever you're trying to roll out, right? That's kind of one of the issues I've seen is unbridled optimism, and you need to bridle it
yeah.
a little bit, right? It's excellent to think that you're going to start this business and you're going to change the world and everyone's going to be great and the world's going to thank
Mm,
you for it and you're going to get rich. But there's 100 steps from there to here, right?
thousands of steps, sometimes, 100%. Um, Without that awareness, you're probably just going to stumble through it. And I think that awareness gives you a great opportunity to go, this is what could go wrong. These are what my plans can be. These are the steps I can put in place. Whether maybe it's if it's within a business, it could be you have a stopgap, a certain budget in case something goes wrong. It could be anything that helps you mitigate your risks. It helps to not blindly walk forward. And I guess for me, that's by far the biggest takeaway that I could take from this. I know I ever took from this idea of we're unconsciously seem to be putting ourselves through difficult situations. As long as I've been aware of that, I've been able to go, right, how do I not keep putting myself in shitty situations, or how do I potentially mitigate against them, as well as seeing myself in that better light, you know? So I really feel what you're putting down there.
Yeah, I mean, this pain that's unavoidable, and then and you
Mm,
kind of go through it with an attitude. And we've discussed this kind of topic a few times with different guests on the show. There's pain avoidance, which can be detrimental, right?
mm,
If you're in the gym and you're trying to get stronger, you want to get bigger muscles or have body composition
yeah,
change or whatever you want to call it, you have to go through some pain. You can't just go in there and like stretch
yeah,
lightly and then kind of maybe flap your arms around and hope that you get big muscles one day. You got to really push
yeah,
it. You got to burn some stuff. Same with any kind of business or entrepreneurship. You really got to push it to be able to get results, right? You can't push it a little bit, because when you push things a
yeah.
little bit, you only get a little bit of results.
You know what? One of my favorite pieces of advice that I've ever been given is the idea that if your goals aren't audacious enough, if they aren't difficult enough, you're probably not going to achieve them,
Yeah.
because either you set the bar too low, so your goals aren't worth achieving in the first place, or they are kind of worth achieving, but they're not difficult enough for you to bother putting in the effort to actually reach them. And then so you won't reach the goals that you even have set, which aren't as high as they should be. So setting a really difficult and audacious goal is an important part of this for me. I feel like on the idea of kind of pain avoidance, I wonder if it's worth, instead of thinking about, or I should say, if it's worth separating the idea of pain avoidance, um, and kind of this unconscious pain that we have, because or even the idea that there's good pain and bad pain, right? So pain avoidance is often saying all pain is bad pain. But again, if we go back to the idea that we can shift our perspective on if pain is should be attached to fear, or if it's actually can be a good thing, then we can have pain avoidance of things that are genuinely not worth going through, and we can have almost like an excitement or an anticipation, a more positive take on potential pain that is worthwhile. Now that's anti-human in a way, because if we go, no, like no one should be going, oh, I'm really excited to fail at launching a new product or something like that. But it's this idea that if failure is inevitable and that pain is inevitable, I think it's worth training ourselves a little bit to be excited about what you might learn if something does go wrong. Even after your mitigation, even after the work you've put in, something could still always go wrong. But if you're confident you can learn from it, not all pain is created equal. And therefore, it might be worth thinking more positively about, okay, you know what? At least I'm excited that no matter what, I can always learn something from it at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, and it's all just a mindset at that point to figure it out,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you hear the story about Thomas Edison figured out 1,000
Mm.
ways not to make a light bulb before he finally
Yeah.
figured out how to make a light bulb.
Exactly. Yeah. He just shifted that mindset, just shifted the perspective on what happened.
Yeah, here's all the ways you shouldn't make a light bulb. Here's the one way I figured out how it works, actually.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Materials with the gases, with the setup,
Mm.
and it's trial and error a lot of times. You have to kind of know with what you know, and then tweak it and go from there. So yeah, really interesting stuff. I mean, it is a lot of it. Mindset does get you, like, they'll say 90% of the way, right? The last
Yeah.
10% is execution, right? You could have the
Is
most
yeah.
optimistic, positive outlook on something, but you also have to be pragmatic, especially if your money or your investor's money or someone else's money is on the line,
Mm.
right? You have to be a little bit smarter about how you do it, but you can't have paralysis by analysis, right? I tell this to people all the
Yeah.
time in real estate, like, well, what if this and what if that? I'm like, listen, the first step we need is to talk to someone that's willing to work with us.
Yeah.
After that, there's going to be 100 different what ifs, but leverage
Mm.
my experience to hopefully be able to come up with solutions for that when I'm
Mm.
trying to train a new person on my team, right? Right. When we're
Mm-hmm.
saying, hey, let's go buy properties or let's talk to homeowners to make a deal work. Um, they'll ask about all the 100 things that can go wrong after we talk to them. I was like, first talk to them, because that's the first
Yeah.
first step. That's
Yeah.
the hurdle right there. You get them
Yeah.
talking to you. We're 90% of the way there. Now the last 10% is specialized
Mm.
information that I've accrued over 10, 15, 20 years of being in this business, right? Which
Yeah.
it's going to take time, but ideally people that are working with me have a mentor to bounce ideas off of or to leverage as a resource. because it's a
Yeah.
partnership, right? It's hard to be an entrepreneur by yourself. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's nice to have a team.
It's really helpful to have a team, and you know what? And I'm sure you're familiar with a kind of similar idea within entrepreneurship itself. That the idea is the 1% and the execution is the 99%. Everyone and their mom has an idea, you know.
Yeah.
Everyone and their grandmother has an idea, but how many of those ideas get executed, and then how many of those ideas that get executed well enough to succeed or be sustainable. Um, and so once you've taken your time and you can be more aware and you've done some reflection analysis, that can't just stay there, and you definitely have to put in the hard work to make it work for you in your life. A
Yep.
1000%.
Yep. Awesome. Well, Seven, hey, it's been really great chatting with you. Any final thoughts before we
Yeah.
kind of wrap this up?
No, I think that's it for me. I think we've covered it really well. Thank you so much for having me on here. It's been really fun for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the takeaway that maybe we could both learn from it is that pain maybe isn't pain. Maybe it's just uncomfortable. And
Yeah,
maybe it's just
pain
not,
isn't. Yeah,
maybe it's not maybe it's just not comfortable yet, right? And I
yeah,
like that word
pain is not
yet,
comfortable.
right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this. Are you good at it? Well, not yet, but I'm working on it.
Mm, Pain is pain for me. I suppose if I were to add a takeaway, it's that if you are confident with this idea that pain can be this state of not comfortable yet, then maybe you shouldn't, or maybe fear shouldn't be something we attach to pain. Pain doesn't always have to be this scary thing. It can be a good thing too. Maybe that would be my takeaway
Yeah,
from my perspective
fear is
too.
healthy, but then you have to assess if there's actual danger associated
Mm,
with it,
mm,
and then just think it through, right? What happens if, right?
mm-hmm,
So that's how you turn fear into just something that you can avoid
mm,
if you're aware that it's on the horizon, right? If you're
yeah,
going down that river and you're like, crap, I see a bunch of bubbling water up there. There's something coming up. I should have
yeah,
walked this river first before I took a kayak down it because I can't see what's down there,
yeah.
right?
Maybe
That's
at that
fear.
point, fear is useful.
Yeah, fear is
Yeah,
useful. Is like pull off. Let's see what I'm getting into, and is it dangerous or
yeah,
not?
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So
100%.
cool. Well, Seven, hey, thanks for joining me. It was a really interesting conversation. Please like, comment, subscribe. Another great episode of I've Got a Theory. Thanks for joining me.